So I laid out my cards and started talking about them, and the video just completely cut off. So I'm gonna try again and see what happens. Okay, this card came face down. So I put it at the top, and I put the cards like this, because the rest of them all came face up. I flip this card over, and it looks like this. The Three of Hearts, or the Three of Swords in the reverse. And I said that this is a very creepy character, but he's also holding one of the swords with his feet, so he's a very good swordsman, right? Then I brought up that it reminds me of my ex, who was an incredibly good gift giver, very thoughtful with his gifts. Just that one of his gifts is being able to give very good gifts. And he had bought me a birthday card once that was wooden. It was like a hand-carved wooden card. It was very cool, and it was tied together with ribbon. It was real, and it made me cry. He wrote like a poem in there, like a love poem, like a love song in there for me. That made me cry. It was incredible. It was such a nice gift. And in it, he put it in a card, or in an envelope, I mean. And on the envelope, he drew essentially like this type of character. It was this really buff heart that was like just really goofy looking, and he had a cigarette in his mouth. And he was just this like badass heart, right? And it was very sweet, and I remember absolutely swooning over it. That was like one of the best gifts I've ever been given, really. I've been giving some good things by good people, but that was just so, it was from his heart, and it was very sweet, and I remember that heart image forever. He didn't draw a lot either, and when he did, like, this was so unique and so beautiful. There was a lot of ways that me and my ex were just incredibly toxic for each other and weren't good for each other, and he was incredibly dangerous, but he was also, like, he's a very beautiful person. He has some seriously beautiful qualities, and I always loved all of those things about him. You know, I still love him. I just know better than to have anything to do with him. But this is the vibe that I'm getting from that too. So like, you got this heart who like is fully exposed, with these big muscular arms and legs, but the heart is fully exposed. But he's got one eye closed. He's got like some type of card or something attached to his head with tape. It really does remind me of that birthday card. And like, that was at a time when like, the thing about my ex is that like, he doesn't go to therapy, and he's never been diagnosed with anything, but he admitted that he's probably bipolar, because he can be two completely different people. He can be an incredibly compassionate, sweet, thoughtful, caring person, very protective, kind, in touch with his emotions, so good with like kids and animals. Like I said, like incredible at gift giving, like very loving towards his family and very loyal. Or he can be like this whole other person that's terrifying, extremely violent, aggressive, angry, like dangerous person, capable of anything you could possibly imagine. I mean, all sorts of toxic behavior towards other people. Like, he can just be really, really crazy sometimes. And it's like when he is in that mode, he's like very proud of being that way, and it just like becomes something that you're not safe around. And it's a shame, because he has so many other beautiful qualities. Super talented musician, incredibly talented musician, artistically. You know, he's really good with his hands. He's great at, you know, mechanical work, physical labor. Like, he does a good job. He's a responsible person. It's just a shame, because then, like, when that bit of insecurity hits, all of a sudden he is someone else, and he can't be trusted. He lies, he cheats, he steals, he makes threats. He is willing to set people up for all types of things. Cares about money more than anything, you know, is willing to kill somebody over money. Like, he gets real crazy. And it's just a shame. But that's the energy that I'm getting from this. And the Three of Swords usually has 3 swords buried in the heart, and it's kind of the sign of heartache and heartbreak. I see that in this. But like in this, I'm also seeing, like, with that one eye closed, the one eye open, and with him being the one holding the swords, like, it's giving me that energy of him being in heartbreak, but also that, like, look on his face where it's like he's doing it to himself, and it's like he's like has to be in control of those things. And I get it, like, it's a trauma response for sure. And he has a fucked up family, and, you know, he comes from, like, his dad's really fucked up, and, you know, he does his best to handle those things as best as he can, but when he doesn't know how to handle it, he doesn't know how to handle it, and he goes off the deep end. I understand it. I just had to remove myself from it in order to protect myself. It's a shame to see, but that's the energy that I'm getting. And so, to make this a more universal reading, it could be referencing an ex of yours. An ex of yours doesn't just have to be a romantic partner. It can also be like a past job or a situation or environment, a friend, a coworker, somebody, though, that you had a very close bond to, perhaps even somebody that you trauma bonded with, or something that you trauma bonded with. Maybe it was a career that wasn't right for you, and it had the tendency to, like, have all of these amazing qualities that were exactly what you would hope for in that career, but the downsides of it were just too major, and it was dangerous. It became a threat, and it's hard to let those things go. You know, I remember when I had officially finally left him, I let him know that like, he was the best I'd ever had in pretty much every degree. But at the same time, there were so many different things that were so toxic between us that I knew that he was still second best to what I truly deserved. And, you know, like, that that there was something else, somebody else, something else out there for me. And that the longer that I validated, you know, that being with him is okay, the more that I would just be settling for that. And he deserved more than to be settled for. And that if it was right for me to not be with him, then it would be right for him to not be with me, in the sense that there's also somebody and something better than me out there for him. And I trusted that as much as I could find those things, that he could find those things too. And he was really understanding at the time, but at the same time, it was also, you know, he tended to have a difficulty letting me go. He was the type of person to say, if I can't have you, no one can. And he meant it. At the time, he was willing to take my life so that nobody else could have me if I wasn't willing to be with him. He was very controlling that way, very terrifying. Like I said, it was a back and forth, because if he had me, you know, then he would become incredibly sweet and incredibly loving. But that was just all like a control tactic, ultimately, that I couldn't handle. And so, you know, there's something that's resonant, something that your heart has love for, that has love for you, but it's not good for you. It's not the best thing for you. It's not right for you. And you've removed yourself from it, but there's this, like, revenge feeling coming from this card. It hasn't removed itself from you fully. Maybe it still feels like there's some sort of unfinished business, and that it can reconnect with you, and that you'll make a space for that. By the look of this card, I'm saying don't make a space for that. The way that you felt when you made the decisions that you felt were the right ones, and you kind of just need to double down on those so that you can continue to move forward. But we'll go deeper. The next line, how is this to be read? Well, the next line that we have then is this Ten of Swords in the reverse, which I had recently in another meeting too, in another reading. This shadow character is like quite nefarious seeming, only for the fact that he's taking all of these swords in his back and he still has this like wicked smile on his face, right? And because it's coming directly under this Three of Swords, like, it's take one more look at this guy. Take a good look at this guy. This card is scary. Because it's coming right under that guy, it's giving me this sense of like these being connected. Like this is like a trigger, right? To that like, oh, you're gonna stick 10 swords in my back? Stick another one in, daddy. Right? But it's in the reverse. So it's almost like protecting oneself from that. That was always my energy, to be clear. That's how I managed being with him when he was unstable, because I was also unstable. That's why we were toxic. And my toxicity had me like bonding myself to somebody that I knew was dangerous. Wasn't the first time, wasn't the last time. And yeah, so it's giving me that energy where like that is where the connection had been. But as soon as I put myself in the reverse about it, where I was like, okay, I'm not going to take on any more of these swords. Whether I'm just done with it, I'm over it, I'm tired, I don't deserve this, I have something else I want to do. I stopped receiving that. I stopped, and it was kind of almost like that the more swords he would stay, because this guy's got all these swords and he can even use them with his feet, so I imagine he's had all these different swords and now he just has these 3 that he's almost like protecting himself with, because he's seen that no matter how many swords he stabs into me, it ain't doing shit. And so like as soon as I got into this energy of like, okay, I'm gonna go into protection mode now, like I'm done receiving swords from you, then he also went into protection mode, where he's like, well, I'm not done stabbing you. But he also wasn't going to let himself get hurt. And that's the worst part about this. Like, it really is heartbreaking to see it. Because, like, what I'm seeing, too, is that in that self-protection, like, it's like, because he's hurt. He's hurt. So he has to protect himself. And his heart is what's hurt. Where for me, it was like, you're hurting my body, you're hurting my sense of self, you're hurting, my well-being. You're creating a very toxic environment, but I realized that me staying in that position was what was making the allowance for it, so I changed that. And then in putting myself in the reverse, it also put him in the reverse. This is why you don't bond yourself to people that aren't right for you. You take your time to get to know people properly, because you can hurt people. You can hurt people too. And I've done it a lot, and it's very hard for me to not take responsibility for that, but to like take enough responsibility to not keep it from happening again. Because I have a heart for people that have certain traumas and issues, because I myself have, and because I've worked through them and learned how to overcome so many things, it's almost like it feels like I can help you, right? That fucking savior complex starts playing in these intimate relationships, and it's never healthy or helpful. If somebody tells me that they're bipolar, I already know that that doesn't work for me, so I should just like be like, listen, I don't want you to feel bad, but you're gonna end up feeling a lot worse if we continue this, so I'm just gonna have to step away. My PTSD don't work with that shit, because that was what led to a lot of my PTSD. Sorry, but also not sorry. But that's about taking personal responsibility. There was an ego here of like, oh, I can handle it and I can take all these things on. There's an ego in that savior complex, and as we move forward into the next card, I'm moving around now because I see that this card also has swords, and we were just talking about all these swords. So in this card, It's in the reverse, but in the upright, it's kind of the sense of being greedy. You're already carrying all of these swords and almost kind of struggling to carry all of these swords, but you see two more. And so you're like, oh, look at that. Oh, there's more swords. Maybe I can grab those more swords. Where it's like, so what? To prove how many swords you can take? You don't need to be crucified in order to prove how strong you are. In fact, that, and this point in time, maybe there was a time where that proved strength, okay? But somebody already came and did that to the extreme, you know, Jesus Christ. Like, we're not in that time and place anymore. It's not about how many swords you can take any longer. So this is now in the reverse, right? And so this was the first step of healing too, was to realize, you know what? I got enough swords as it is. I need to work on healing these things. And so we have the Wheel of Fortune, but it's in the reverse. And like this Wheel of Fortune, this whole deck ends up being pretty wicked. This whole deck is kind of terrifying, to be honest. This guy's scary. This peppermint guy is scary. All of these creatures are scary. He's got a snake and a bristle branch in either of his hands. And then there's all these different beasts. And he's got this evil look on his face. And the fact he's in a suit makes me feel like he's just maniacal. He just has this maniacal sense. And like the suit is kind of like giving me this like specific time. It's the Wheel of Fortune. So it's like there's a specific time. And it's almost like he's preparing for like the curtain to open, right? For showtime. In the reverse, though, again, it's giving me this feeling of like, getting off that wheel. Like, this is the wheel of bad fortune. You know, it's almost like, there's there's all of these good seeming qualities, but it's mixed with so much negativity that like, in order to get to those good things, you have to go through too much. It's just too much. It's not worth it. It's the same thing where it's like, it just becomes this ego thing where it's like, what? Okay, so you're going to wait for that very specific thing and do that very specific thing to receive that very specific reward. But you're risking everything for it. And like, I'm getting there, just a reminder again to not be greedy, not be arrogant. Which is something I've always struggled with. And it's also like, you know, a matter of like truly knowing yourself. When you can't truly know yourself if you're in denial of yourself. So if you're denying that you tend to be arrogant, or that you tend to be petty, or that you tend to be shallow, or that you tend to be a little crazy, you're never going to get to knowing yourself truly. And like embracing the Wheel of Fortune is like being able to recognize that there's all these negative things. But in this position, I'm getting like, you don't need to interact with it. Coming directly after, we were just taught to not be greedy. So like, maybe it's just like showing you that there could be these things that you could receive, but is it really worth it? What is it that you're actually investing into? What is it that you're risking in your investments? And is it worth it? And consider that every energetic output on your part is an investment. Every energetic input on your part is an investment. The things that you give and the things that you receive are investments, both in of and into yourself. And consider what it is that you're actively putting out and that you're actively receiving that way. Is this really the best for you? And even if it's the best that you've ever had, is that only because you've always been limiting yourself with your arrogance and your greed and your lack of self-awareness? Could it be that you are settling for second best to what you truly deserve and then validating it because it's the best that you've ever had? Because that can happen easily enough if you've never opened yourself to what is truly best for you, right? And so then the whole focus shifts from taking on these swords for any reason, because this kind of has the energy first of taking on swords to prove how much you can take. Like, oh, I can handle another sword in my back, put another sword in, right? And not doing that, to also not trying to see how much you can collect to defend yourself. It's not about defending yourself. It's about moving away from needing to defend yourself at all in order to embrace this Three of Cups that we have here, which is like these water people, being able to, move into a more fluid state of being, where you're not having to constantly be on the defense, where you're not in arrogance, you're not in greed, you're not in anxiety, you're not in this self-protection mode. You don't have to be. You're free to enjoy what it is that you have to offer. I mean, we've moved as far away from this first character as possible at this point. However, there's only one card technically in between us. What I'm noticing too is that this is the Three of Cups and that this is the Three of Swords, right? So we've got two threes, and the Three of Swords being in the reverse and the Three of Cups being in the upright has them converging into this Ten of Swords. And so this is in the reverse at the beginning because it's a reminder not to be given to these things. But as we move into a more fluid state, it's connecting with this in a way that's like reminding you what you've learned through this process, to a reminder to you're not becoming fluid to the degree that like you don't exist any longer. You fully exist. You just exist in a different state. So these parts of you that were in the past, there's things that you had to move away from in order to better yourself. And that was for the best. But it's not about forgetting yourself, right? You want to continue to be able to use every part of every aspect of your experience as a resource, if at all possible. That's the best alternative for any of your experiences. If you've been through something that you considered traumatic, the best thing you can do with it is use it for your empowerment. But not in the way of, oh, I have all these swords that have been stabbed into me, and now I can take them out and stab them into other people. Now you're just becoming like those who stabbed you. The best thing that you can do is learn how to use those swords for something even better, right? And to use that experience for something even better. Maybe you just put the swords up on a wall as a reminder while you carry those scars and use those scars as your story. You don't have to use the swords. It's what you choose to. Maybe you do use the swords and you use them, you gift them to people, to young knights that can't afford their own sword, and you teach them how to become better knights because of what you've gone through. Maybe, you turn them into some beautiful artwork that never existed prior, and it speaks, profoundly of the experiences that you've had and everything that you've been through just to be able to become so soft and creative and gentle. You know, there's so many different opportunities as to what to do with these things. What we have truly moved away from is just the sense of anxiety about that, the sense of arrogance and fear about those things, the sense that you have to defend yourself, and in that you're able to kind of move back through and see through those swords. You know, I'm looking, I'll show you the way that it's set up. You know, I'm down here in my Three of Cups, and I'm looking through these swords in order to see the past. And in that past, like I'm looking through these swords to see the heart of the matter. You know, when I was first experiencing this, and without having gone through everything that I'd gone through, and without being able to recognize my own swords, and without being able to use those swords for something better, and without moving away from this sense of having to defend myself and this anxiety that I'm constantly in danger, I felt in danger, and this was incredibly terrifying. And what I saw wasn't the heart of the matter as much as it was that heart had these swords that it was trying to kill me with, right? And like this muscular being that, like, you know, was terrifying. But like now that I'm looking back, I can look through those swords, and I can see that with every sword that was placed into my back, that person was only hurting themselves. Because obviously I'm okay. I've been able to move through these things. I've been able to transmute these things and to become even stronger than I ever was because of these things. And I'm in a much better place because of that. But this person is still hurt. In fact, they're hurt worse now than they were when I had first met them, right? Because they've done these things. And it's like, that's not what I wanted for them. You have to allow people to make their own decisions. You don't try to control people, but it's a shame. It is a shame to see. But at the same time, like, I mean, looking through the swords, like, we're reminded that we're protected, you know. And again, we've moved very far away from those things. So it's not going back, but let's see, because we're moving back around this way. So now that we've embraced that and been able to look back, we move forward into the Eight of Coins, but in the reverse. In the reverse. And it moves into the Two of Wands in the reverse. Well, the Eight of Coins is normally a sign of, like, getting to the point, well, it's normally a sign of, like, having done a very hard work and starting to see the benefits of that hard work. In the reverse, I guess it's a reflection that, like, I think that's what tended to keep us in this Ten of Swords to begin with, that we've moved away from, where it's like, well, I've already put in the work and already received 2 swords in my back, so what's another sword? Well, I've already received 3 swords in my back, but I've done a lot of work to get to this point, so I can't leave right now. Okay, well, I've received 4 swords in my back, but this takes a lot of strength. You know, like, it's just this it's a miscalculation of the work that's being done and the benefits that there are to be had with it. So it's kind of, I'm also seeing, like, because of this magic, right? And, like, in the card, when it's in the upright, it kind of looks like the magic is being used to bring all of these pentacles out of the air, essentially creating pentacles out of nothing, and then they're falling onto the ground, right? And it's like, okay, I've just amassed this wealth out of nothing, essentially. But in the reverse, it's almost like taking the abundance of what has been received and then transmuting it into something else. I mean, one thing I've pointed out is that in this card, the coins all have fallen onto like flowers here. And so it's almost like using the magic to lift these coins in order to allow these flowers to breathe. There's a different type of growth. It wasn't about that. It wasn't about the pentacles. It was about the magic gained, the magic, being able to manifest certain things for yourself and being able to see, yes, I can manifest these things, but then also being able to say, you know what I just manifested ended up crushing these flowers, ended up not being the best thing for me. So I'm willing to remove that. And I know that I can start again because I manifested this the first time. So I know I can do this again. Because this is an interesting card to me. In the upright, it's like this like shadow. It's like a shadow in a box. And then he's got these two pickles that are like his only friends. I've never seen this episode, so I have no idea what the actual message behind it is. But it gives me this energy of like an illusion between two things. And in the reverse, it's like not falling for the illusion. Of the two, the thing is separating the two, but that thing in of itself is just a shadow. It's just an illusion. When really it's like, it's not about it being one or the other. It's about bothing. I'm always bringing bothing into everything. You want, there are two sides to every two sides that there are to every two-sided story, and we all receive it both ways. It's not about, so now we're coming back. We're coming back to be willing to, not only have we looked through the pain and been able to love as we've moved forward, but now we're coming back to really look at that pain again and really like take our personal responsibility to it, to recognize why we were doing it in the first place. When I first moved away from those things, I did have this like sort of victim mentality. Like, well, yeah, I had to leave because he kept trying to kill me, which hurt my feelings. And so I was like almost gathering a defense, feeling like that's how I was going to stay protected if he ever showed up again. And that did kind of keep me in this anxiety, that at any point in time the wheel could turn and he could show back up and he could find out where I am and threaten my life. And I was scared of that. So I was scared to like genuinely enjoy myself, especially with like-minded people or people that like had any sort of relationship to him. I was focusing on the coins. I was focusing on the material aspects. I was focusing on the abundance that had crushed what I was building and that was now being taken away in this entire process because I was seeing it as one or the other. But as I've gone through this process now and as I come back to my Ten of Swords in the reverse, I can see my personal responsibility in these things. It wasn't just, how dare this person put 10 swords in my back? It was like, how dare I sit around and let somebody put 10 swords in my back? Am I fucking insane? It was me being insane. That's insane. That's ridiculous. When you make excuses and allowances for people to hurt you, you are making excuses and allowances for them to be monstrous. How dare you turn around and call somebody a monster for something you have made space for them to be? You did that. Yes, they have still their own responsibility to their actions and to their desires to do those things. Just because you give somebody the space to take advantage doesn't mean that they're right to take advantage. They still have their own responsibility to not take advantage. But you don't get to be alleviated from the responsibility that you have to yourself and to them in making that space. Because your responsibility is to not make that space. It goes both ways. It takes two to tango. So in this realization, it's that reminder too, where like this taking on all of these sorts, like it wasn't because I was such a victim. It was because I was such a narcissist. Because I wanted to feel like show how much I could take on and how much I could grow through it, or how much I could still love him through it, how much I could still be okay and would still stick around, and what a strong love that was. When really that was narcissism. That was a wicked, weird shadow presenting itself as something valuable. Just because it could take all those things on. It was greed. It was arrogance. It was nothing good. And it led into this Wheel of Fortune, which is a terrifying Wheel of Fortune. It's not a good Wheel of Fortune. Okay, it isn't just money falling from the sky. This is karma. And like, it's a warning as well to not, as we keep going around, it's a warning as well to not be given to those things and to recognize those things and to go to the process to recognize those things in yourself so that you're not making those allowances. One, because this person did not deserve to get hurt like that. This person isn't truly a monster. They are who they are. They are exactly who they are. Okay, so you can look at this and you can say this thing is monstrous, this thing is grotesque. But this thing is exactly what it is. Okay? This person is exactly how they are. And they shouldn't feel damned for that. They should be able to embrace who they are in love and to learn how to make the most of that. But they're never going to get there if they're constantly being hurt. And if you know that there's somebody given to hurting other people in order to hurt themselves, the second you realize that they're doing it to hurt themselves, quit making allowances for it. Don't make any room for it. And recognize that those that are out here trying to hurt others are doing so to hurt themselves. Because they're also trying to make themselves monstrous because they don't see themselves as people. That's why I do not validate that people are monsters. I don't care what they do. I know people that have done monstrous things. That have done despicable, disgusting, evil, wicked things. I know people that have been led into some of the sickest things by others, and they were just forced to do these things. I know people who did these things by choice. None of them are monsters. They're just wicked people. They're not evil. They're just lacking love and truth and an integrity of those things. And I don't believe that anybody's so lost that they can't come to proper reconciliation with their own selves. But I do believe it's a process, you know, and like I've said now in the last few things too, if I recognize this process of personal alchemy and I'm trying to teach it to others, what the fuck am I teaching if the way I'm going about that is by being arrogant to take on all these things so that you can properly alchemize them, to be greedy, like, oh, keep taking on more because you can alchemize it. All you got to do is move away from this wheel. Like, it's so easy without recognizing what it's like for other people, you know, that are just like me. If somebody doesn't have access to this, maybe their process isn't going to look exactly the same. You know, maybe it's not so easy for people just to manifest and then do away with. Maybe that took a lot. It's taken a lot for me to recognize that in myself, where it's like, damn, well, it's honestly because I've had so many things taken from me in my life that I'm okay with things being taken. And that's actually become a strength in my adulthood. But I know plenty of people that didn't have that. I grew up with parents that my friends all thought were super strict. They thought were super fun. My mom always made everything super fun. My friends always loved my parents. But when it came to the way that my parents parented me and my brothers, like, they saw it as super strict. Their parents were stricter about certain things because my parents were fun, but my parents were, like, weirdly strict about other things. Were like, you know, they would especially, like, with our, like, secular friends. Our Christian friends, my parents were the fun ones. But with our secular friends, my parents were always the strict ones. And, like, having that balance even was a blessing for me. My life has been nothing but a blessing for me to be able to get where I am. So how dare I be arrogant enough to just act like this process can be so easy for others. I could never hold it against this person for struggling the ways that they do when I have not lived in their shoes. I've not lived in their skin, in their shoes. That's something my brother taught me when I was very young. He's about 8 years old. And he taught me, one, you can never live in somebody else's shoes. Because even if you put on their shoes and try to walk a mile in them, that would be you walking in their shoes, not them walking in their shoes. You would have to literally crawl inside of somebody's skin, which I think is like, I think it's said in To Kill a Mockingbird, that he was like, you would literally have to crawl inside of somebody's skin and experience life from their point of birth till whenever it is that they are now. You'd have to have their parents. You'd have to go to their schools, have their friends, talk the way that they talk, feel the ways that they feel, think the ways that they think, in order to truly be able to judge them for this position that you're in. He said, ultimately, if you really were that person in their shoes, you would be doing exactly what they're doing. So judging people is stupid because you don't know. You can't know. They're not you. You're not them. And he said, a way to keep from judging people, a way to not be hard on people, a way to love people better is to view everyone as the greatest versions of themselves. And he said, when you see them, everything that they do, as just like they're a superhero, like, one, you'll start to notice that they have qualities you don't have in yourself, and you'll see the goodness in those qualities, but you'll also help them to recognize the goodness of themselves. You know, you treat them like a superhero, they'll start stepping into that as if they are a superhero. And he wasn't wrong, and I've carried those things with me for sure. And like, that is how I've learned how to love, the ways that I've learned how to love. And I think that it's important because, yeah, you can't judge. I can judge the personal experiences I had with this person for what they meant to me. But I've gone through a process too to realize how helpful those things have been, and I've watched that person struggle in the same way to take those things and make the most of them. I've watched them do it in a lot of ways, but I've also watched them suppress a lot and deny a lot and continue to lie and continue to fight. I don't know because I haven't talked to him in years. So I don't know how he really is, but this has given me a reminder of that pain that I saw in him. You know, and it was so hard for him to be vulnerable to begin with. And because he could be so vulnerable with me was also why he was more of a threat to me than anyone else, right? Than he was to anyone else. Because of that vulnerability, and because as soon as he realized that I had that vulnerability, it became a threat to him because he had to protect himself from it, because he didn't know how to process those things, because he hadn't gone through this process. It was easy for me to go through these things because of the life that I've lived. It was easier for me to recognize my savior complex because I was raised Christian and then moved out of Christianity. If I were still to claim Christianity, it would probably be a lot harder for me to understand that savior complex and what to do with it. I'd probably be a lot more given towards narcissistic behavior if I were still given into claiming somebody else as my savior over myself. Strange as that is, it took me claiming myself as my own savior to move away from narcissistic behavior. You know, if I hadn't had everything taken from me, I would probably be a pretty greedy person, carrying on all of these things and still trying to add more. Because in my experience, it's been having everything taken from me that's allowed me to continue to receive from the universe. But I believe that the desire to receive from the universe is innate in our experience. So how hard must it be for those who haven't had everything taken, who want to continue to receive when their arms are full? Because that means that they have to make the choice themselves to let those things go. Yes, I've made these processes to let certain things go, but it has been easier for me because the universe has continued to rip these things out of my hands. I'll tell you, I haven't fully had to go through those choices. I'm learning now what people still have yet to learn because they've never had those same experiences. Those things have been a privilege. You know, losing the things that I have, having had the threats that I've had, having had the swords in my back that I have had, those things have been a privilege. Because it has taught me to be able to alchemize these things, to go through this process, to be able to move away from these things. It's a lot easier to not fear having 10 swords in your back when you've had 10 swords in your back since you were a child and continue to survive. Of no fault of your own, by the way. You know, I've learned these things and applied these things in my adulthood, but as a child, I was innocent, and this work was just being done through me. And it took me becoming an adult and being able to recognize those things and being able to take from those things and then make it an active work that matured me and allowed me to sustain and to continue to survive and to even to thrive. But as a child, that was all the universe just doing that. That was not even me. I mean, it was my ancestors through me, but you know, that's not something I can take like this, like pride in, like I've tried to as an adult. Those were privileges being handed to me. You know, the same sort of thing where like, I've always struggled with friendships. I've always struggled with having people close to me. I've always struggled with different levels of intimacy. And because of that, it's been a lot easier for me to move away from people that I know aren't good for me, but that I love so deeply. How much harder must it be for someone to do that when this is all that they've ever had? This is all they've ever had. They don't know anything else. And when all that you have is this and you don't know anything else, how are you supposed to trust in what's on the other side? There's no proof to you that there is something on the other side. I was forced through those walls. You know, so like I don't get to claim any sort of like, this is me being so powerful. And that's honestly what drives me into wanting to share these things with people. And will continue to drive me into that because this isn't something that I've done on my own. This isn't something I've done by my own fruition. You know, this is something that I've been moved through because of the universe. I've been taught all of these things because of my personal experiences. Again, having nothing to do with me truly, outside of the fact that it's me that it's been experiencing these things. But because of that, I know that like I'm no more deserving than anyone else. The reason I believe that I was called for these things is because I have the capacity to receive them and to give them to others. That's it. It was just like, okay, which picture are we going to use to put all of this stuff into because we want it poured out into the rest of the universe? God was looking and saying, which picture should we use? Because we, the universe, God has so much to give the world. But we need something to give it through so that we're not just dumping it onto the world, right? Which picture? And so they found me as much as they found anyone else for any of these things. I mean, we're all pictures for our own different purposes. You know, but that was the specific, like, it's not, me being arrogant is ridiculous. Every time. And I know I still struggle with it, and I know I still come out with those energies. Please forgive me. I am working on it. I swear that I am. I hope that that is evident. But yeah, it's in no way justified, because any power that you see in me is not coming from me. You know, it's coming through me. And that's the greatest power that I have, is to be able to be removed from myself. And that has been a privilege that has been taught to me and given to me through being forced to remove myself. I didn't have an identity I was able to claim as my own growing up. I feel privileged in that way. I watched my I watched my exes, nieces, and nephews have to know themselves as their own individual people at such young ages, and it blew my mind. I loved those people. At 3 years old, his niece knew herself more than I still do in my 30s, you know? But at the same time, that was because she didn't have the same sort of tender, loving care and affection that I was receiving from my parents. And my parents have come up against me most of my life. My parents have done a lot to damage me, but they still loved me in a tender way and like cared for me in these ways that allowed me a space to come into myself in a more secure way. I wasn't forced into it. At the same time, they also sheltered me and controlled me in a lot of ways that left me not knowing who I was or how to access myself, that she had total freedom to learn. You know, so there's a balance. Like I said, there's always a both of things. We're both blessed as much as we are both cursed, and we both have an equal capacity as individuals to be able to come into our own. And the blessing, I would hope, is that being an adult, going before her, I'm able to craft a world and a space in which she can exist a little easier, a little lighter. I could do that for her while I was around her, and I tried my best to. I love his nieces and nephew, all of his nephews and nieces, his whole family. I really do love them very much. And as long as I was around them, I tried my best to be as loving as possible and to offer as safe of a space as possible for everybody just to be themselves and be okay being themselves, to not have to fight, to not have to, you know, cheat each other and rob each other and, you know, want to kill each other. It wasn't easy. You know, I dealt with a lot within his family. His brother-in-law sexually assaulted me. You know, his mom had made a bunch of threats against me. His, you know, one sister had made weird threats against me when she was like doing voodoo and shit, and like they got all weird. His other sister threatened me when she thought that I was going to try to talk to her kids about me being a trans person. I mean, their family was really out there, really wild. And I still feel for my ex because I know his heart. I know his heart. This is literally how I see him. Strong on the outside, yes, but fully exposed. He's so sensitive. Such a sweet boy. Just fucked up. And so much of no fault of his own. Just doing his best with it, you know? And just protecting himself. He's just trying to protect himself. And he's very good at protecting himself to the point where, like, he could easily cut you on accident just trying to protect himself, you know? It's a shame. And because his family doesn't let him be himself. He can't just be himself. He always has to be on edge. He always has to be on the defense. And it's not fair. I was able to get away from my family. They didn't realize who I was. They didn't care to. They thought that they knew me. They never took the time to. So when I was an adult, suddenly they didn't recognize me. And that gave me full freedom to just go off and be myself. But his family tells him who he is even still. Not only do they tell him who he is, they tell him who he can and can't be. They hold everything against him. And it's heartbreaking. And I don't blame him for being on the defense. And I don't blame him for struggling so much to receive love. I don't blame him for getting so violently angry at having to be vulnerable when that vulnerability starts to become arrogant, or starts to become greedy, or starts to try to defend itself against him in its own anxiety. Because that was fucked up too. I was having like some crazy anxiety. My PTSD was worse than it ever had been when I was with him. In part because of the relationship, but in part that was just where I was with my healing. And there was a point where I had an actual flashback where I like full on was back in Baltimore, even though I was sitting in my apartment in Elkhorn. And that was crazy. And I remember like there was like a whole week where I was like having an extremely hard time, and I was waking up at night and hearing all these crazy things. And I remember waking him up one day. We slept in different beds. I remember waking him up one night terrified. I was terrified. And so I was like right in his face and I was scared. And I was like there's something in here. There's a sound or something like that. And it triggered his PTSD. And then he was freaking out. And he was like, you're scaring me. And I was like, I'm scared. And we were just so toxic for each other. We were so toxic for each other. And when I would have that really bad anxiety, it would trigger his anxiety to the point where he'd become violent and aggressive, which was not good for my anxiety. And now I'm being actively victimized for my anxiety because it's victimizing him. We were not good for each other. But we did love each other. And it was hard because neither of us knew what love really was. All we knew was toxicity. And that's what we kept giving each other, thinking that it was love. You know? And like, these things are why I've come to where I've come. Again, these are privileges. They're hard things. It's hard memories. It was a fucking hard time to be through. And it was a lot to move away from. You know, obviously I still feel for it, but, you know, I've learned from these things, and I'm thankful for that. And I'm continuing to learn. And I hope that I can teach others so that they can learn from these things too, hopefully so that they don't have to go through the same shit. So you don't need 10 whole swords in your back before you finally realize how arrogant you're being and can move away from that. So that you don't have to continue to gather swords just to try to show how strong you are, just to prove your alchemy. Maybe you can do something less toxic and so much better. You know, if I can reveal these things and be honest about that and not be arrogant to the point where I'm too afraid to, you know, express the ways that I still fall short, that others can see that and that they can take that onto themselves and be like, you know what? I don't actually need to do that. And I'm going to take what I've learned and I'm going to do this, and they can do even better. Like even better, right? That's my hope. That's my hope. I want to leave this world better than I came into it. I want to leave this world better than I came into it. I want to leave this world better than like it was when I came into it. The best I can do is by being better myself. And so much of that for me is just about being honest. And then being able to share of these experiences, what I've learned, breaking them down in a certain way so that others can see that and others can learn from that. And that's what I hope. And I hope that you continue to love instead of fear, and that you move through these processes with love, and that you let it guide you back to love, but in a way that isn't toxic, in a way that isn't making excuses for toxic behavior on either side. Remember that it takes two to tango. You are not being victimized without making yourself a victim. No human can back you into a corner in which you did not crawl. Don't listen to me. Listen to the you through me. It all revolves around you. As much as you want it to, as much as you let it. You know, you're the one in control. You're the one putting yourselves in those positions. Yes, it's hard when it comes to somebody that you love, that you are bound to, when it comes to family, friends, jobs, careers, things that have sustained you in all of these different ways, you know. This abundance was everything, but you have to be willing to let it go if it's not right for you. Even if it's the best you have ever had, you have to be willing to know what is truly best for you and to recognize when something is second best to what you truly deserve, and to move into a space where you allow yourself what you truly deserve. Because if you are settling for less than what you truly deserve, you're also allowing others to settle for second best, or to offer you second best, to offer you less than what you truly deserve. And that isn't fair to them either. It isn't love to let somebody be monstrous to you. To let somebody be a monster, that isn't love. Don't make spaces for people to be that way. Don't make spaces for you to be treated that way. We all deserve so much better. Okay. I think I'm going to do another one quite shortly with a different deck. But I appreciate you listening. I hope this is helpful. And yeah, that you make the most of it. That's really all Thanks for listening, and I will see you in the next one.